Hello and welcome. This is my next video in my coffee chat series with the investment platforms to help you compare and contrast ethical and sustainable options. And this chat is with Clare Reilly, who is the Chief Engagement Officer at Pensionbee. And it was such a fun conversation. They're doing really great things, so I think you'll enjoy it.
Thanks again for joining me for this chat.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks. You're a bit different to the other platforms in that you specialise in pensions. And still people don't get, or most people don't get, that if they've got a pension, they are an investor. So you're totally relevant, when I'm having these conversations with investment platforms. Can you tell me a bit about Pensionbee and how it came about and why people need it?
Sure. So we're an online pension provider, and we help people combine all of their old pensions from periods of previous employment into one new plan managed by the world's biggest investment managers. We came about actually as a result of a pension transfer gone wrong. So Romy, our founder, back in 2014, had to move one of her old workplace pensions when she changed jobs. And so she thought, okay, this is easy. She actually works in financial services, so she thought it was going to be dead easy. It turned out to be really complex, and it ended up being the birth of a business because she kind of quickly discovered that the whole pensions market in the UK is just not set up to serve consumers. And by that, I mean it's extremely complex. No one knows how much they're paying in fees. No one knows where their money is invested. No one knows what their balance is, sometimes even who their provider is, mainly offline. And generally, people are not having a great experience. And then you add into the mix auto enrollment, which means every time you start a new job, you get a new one of these pots. And Pensionbee was born. So we exist to simplify the whole pension saving experience. The mission is to make pensions simple and engaging. We have the palm of your hand. You can, from your phone, you can get a real-time balance of your pension. You can make contributions at 55 withdrawals. You can transfer more pensions across. You can see where your money is invested, and all from your phone. So that's it. We're trying to make pension saving exciting and enjoyable.
Amazing. And what I would normally ask an investment platform now is like, why should anyone invest? But I think with pensions, it's just much more obvious why we should have a pension when people are thinking about it.
Yes, I mean, everyone in the UK who's working for an employer is legally now required to be given a pension under auto enrollment. So and I think 52 million, there are 52 million people with a pension in the UK. And so what that means is they're all investors. They may not realize it, but they are investors. And even if it's a very small pot of money from a job that you only worked for 3 months or 6 months, you're still an investor and you're still invested in thousands of companies around the world. And so I think it's a really good entry point for people who are trying to kind of understand maybe the investment system for the first time. Maybe taking a look at their pension is a nice way to kind of a first step on their journey to kind of understanding more about investments.
Yeah. And what if you don't have loads of money to save and put away? Like, what type of minimum amounts are you seeing on the platform? And is it still worth it when you're only putting, say, 50 quid a month away or something like that?
So look, we don't have any minimums, and the reason for that is because we know that people's financial situation changes. We also have a pension for the self-employed. We know particularly with the self-employed customers, they don't have income that is necessarily regular, so we don't have any minimums at all, and there's also no minimum amount transferred in. So we're for everybody, really. I mean, look, I think the first thing to say about investing into a pension is there's free money out there for the taking, right? So there's free money from government, and there's also free money from your employer potentially if you work for someone. So that doesn't happen very often. So every time you make a personal contribution into your pension, HMRC is going to top that up by 25%. So that's completely free money from the government. And then, of course, with your employer as well, many employers will match your contributions. So, for example, if you're putting 6% or 10% into your pension, your employer will match that. And so that, first of all, is free money. And then you have compounding, this magical thing called compound interest, where if you're saving for the long term, as your pot grows, you get interest on the interest. And it's kind of the snowball effect, like a snowball rolling downhill. And so I think, there are real tangible benefits to long-term saving. And it also kind of makes you feel good to watch a small amount of money grow over time. Is £10 or £50 enough? Look, every huge oak tree started from a small seed, right? And I think starting small is better than not starting at all. And I think too many people say, oh, I can't afford to put away £500 a month, so I'm not going to bother, right? That's not the right approach. I think even a small amount of money put away early enough can be something quite significant when you reach retirement. So obviously, if you start earlier and you are going to put in smaller amounts, yes, they will have more impact in retirement. But I don't think that, saying that I don't have a huge amount of money to put in today is a reason not to start saving at all. I think actually getting in the habit of saving and getting used to saving and putting money away is a really healthy habit for life. And obviously the future version of you will really thank you.
And so another reason I wanted to speak to you is because you have got funds available for people who want to have a positive impact with their money. So you do have some sustainable options, and you've got a fossil-free option as well. That's new, isn't it?
Yeah, we just launched that in December 2020, and that was launched in direct response to customer feedback that we'd had from the beginning of the year onwards around oil companies and how the time for engagement with oil companies is over. So we went to the market and we got them to create a completely new type of pension savings product that didn't exist before in the market. So that's quite exciting, and that's in direct response to our customers asking for it.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, I remember, a lot of my friends that have used Pensionbee, that was something that they wanted, and it was just so great to see you respond to that and to do that. So yeah, congrats, that was really great. One of the misconceptions people have, though, when it comes to those sustainable options is that the returns are compromised,
right,
don't do as well as other options. I mean, what to people that say that?
Look, I think 2020 was a really good year for us to kind of understand that that's not true. So in 2020, we saw kind of two groups of investors kind of, merge together, and we had investors in like sustainable funds who were doing it on moral grounds, and they were saying, for moral reasons, I will not invest in these companies, even if that means I take a hit on my performance. But when we saw all the markets crash, and we saw the pandemic, and we saw kind of no one really knowing what was happening with kind of global stocks around the world, what we actually saw was people who invest, who are starting to want to move into sustainable funds because for financial reasons. So the funds that did the best or performed the best in 2020 were going to be the funds that didn't have oil in them or didn't have investment in companies that were kind of have a heavy reliance on oil. So for example, the airline industry. So often a lot of ethical funds in 2020 outperformed normal funds because they didn't have that heavy reliance on industries that the pandemics hit really hard. So for somebody that would have been in kind of their workplace ethical fund at the beginning of the year, because it wouldn't have had oil in it, or probably, or kind of heavy carbon emitters, it would have had a heavy it would have had a lot of investment into kind of big technology companies, which have done really well over the past year because everyone's gone online. And so actually over the last year, I think we've seen that investing sustainably or investing kind of in line with your values actually doesn't mean that you need to take any sort of hit on performance over the course of the last year. But of course, future performance, past performance is no indication of future performance, but that's just what we've seen, I think, over the last year. And it's been quite an interesting year for this debate.
Yeah. And so when you're choosing your funds and the fund managers that you're working with, how do you know that those funds are sustainable? How do you know that they're having the impact that they say they're going to have? How is that measured?
Okay, so it's really interesting. How do we know they're going to have the impact? Look, at Pensionbee, all of our products, all of the plans on our platform are really simple and really easy to understand. That's because, part of our mission is to make pensions simple. So therefore, we only offer the type of very easy to understand, simple products that would be available in the workplace anyway. So what that means is we don't have the types of products where it's hard to measure the impact that they're having. So for example, the fossil fuel free plan that you described, that is a really simple product in its construction. It just basically has removed all fossil fuel companies. So all companies with oil, gas, or coal, proven or probable reserves being removed, tobacco's gone out, controversial weapons manufacturers gone out, and then UN Global Compact violators. And so what we've got is a kind of ingredients list. You know, the same way that if you buy something in a shop or put something on your face, right, you're going to have a list of what's in there. And that's simply saying what is in this product. And you make a decision about whether you want to invest in exactly what is in this product, which is something very different to some of the kind of more complex ESG or impact investing funds that are out there in the market, where they're using lots and lots of kind of data that's not publicly available, or algorithms, or they're doing all sorts of kind of secret source stuff behind the scenes that you'd need a PhD in investing, quite frankly, to understand. And I think what we've seen over the past year, when we saw that Boohoo or some, you know, companies that people, you know, had some quite strong opinions on around kind of the labor practices, were in the top holdings of these ESG funds. And then I think we kind of got a more of an understanding that sometimes the data is not right, or sometimes, you know, the information that's being used isn't right. And so that's why we kind of have gone for the much more, let's get the stuff out that we just have a really strong view on, and begin with that as a starting point for our customers.
Yeah, that makes sense. And another way to kind of cut through the greenwash, I suppose, for people is to see what their holdings are and to understand, you know, what types of companies they're actually invested in. Is that information that you make available to your customers, or is there a way for them to get that?
This is a really interesting one. So we did a survey of all our customers in January 2020, and 81% of the customers that responded to the survey said that they want to be able to see all the companies where their pension is invested in. And they also said they wanted to see information on their business activities. So I think, you know, something that we've been very focused on in the last year is how we surface that information to customers in the right way. Because if you're in a fund that's kind of 100% equity, so 100% invested in companies, and there are a very limited number of companies, it's quite easy to show that information, because you show a list of, I don't know, 100 companies, Amazon and Alibaba and Google, and you put the percentage, you know, weight of the holdings. It's very simple. But unfortunately, a lot of pension funds are invested in a much more complex mix of equities, cash, bonds, gilts, real estates, and a whole kind of mix of stuff that's trying to diversify the portfolio. And so that's when it gets a bit more complicated. So when you have pensions as well, they can often be invested in something called a fund of funds. And this is when it gets really complex. And this is when most people have like switched off. So if everyone's switched off at this point, I understand. But basically, I'll cut to the chase. The point here is that sometimes you've got to go like 5, 6 layers down through this kind of, you know, financial, like, you know, like highly complex, you know, financial products to find actually where the money is invested. And what we've started to do over the last year with our asset managers is to request all of that information. Now, what you discover is sometimes some of these pensions have got 20,000 underlying holdings. Like one of our products has 20,000. So you get a spreadsheet with 20,000 names of companies in. And then you look and you realize that actually the weighting for some of these companies is like 0.001%, right? And then you think, well, do customers need to know that there is an exposure to a company with 0.0001% of the portfolio, right? So then you have to kind of have a conversation like, you know, would it need to be disclosed if I was eating a product or I was putting something on my face? Would that level of detail need to be disclosed? Is it important? Is it important? So what we've tried to do over the past year is have that conversation, and we started to get all the information we need from asset managers. And the next stage is to present that back to customers and the right amount of information in the right way, so that it's actually useful and an engagement tool with customers rather than being overwhelming or too complex, which is goes against our mission.
Yeah, it makes total sense. I mean, it does get so complex. So if you figure that out, and also
no one's asking for this either. So what we've discovered, I think, with managers is because no one's asking for this information, they don't have it readily available.
Right.
So my big kind of ask, I think, for everybody is like, go and ask to see this information, because once the managers of the money or the pension schemes get in the habit of sharing it with 1 or 2 people, it will be available for everybody. And I think then we can all get much more kind of engaged with, you know, the debate on why money is invested in certain types of companies and not others, for example.
Yeah, that's really good point. It'd be great to see more people asking for that information, honestly. Another way that people can have impact with their money is to actually use their shareholder rights and vote at AGMs on shareholder resolutions. Yeah. And this has become much more of a topic. We've seen a couple of platforms, there's two at least that I know of, Tumalo and Citizen Shareholders, that are actually creating the technology to make that easier for individuals to do.
Yeah.
Like, is that something you guys are thinking about, or is it a movement that you kind of see growing?
So both, you know, the tools you've mentioned are like absolutely fantastic for driving engagement. You know, we support all tools that are driving engagement in pensions. I think on the voting piece, it's interesting because lots of pensions are held in something called pooled funds, which means you don't actually get the vote. So I think with these tools, what they're doing is they're asking people to kind of express like voting intent if you know, if they had the vote. So I think for us, that's a really important tool. I think what we need to do for us as a business first is kind of surface the holdings and get the holdings there. And then I think the next step is trying to get the voting ourselves so that we can actually get to a place in the future where we own the votes ourselves as a business. And then when we invite people to express, you know, their voting intent, we actually take that and vote with it. Because most of these big managers won't do something called vote splitting, where they what they do is they take all the assets, they pull them all together for all the funds, and then they vote in a block for all those assets. So it's very difficult for individual shareholders who sit underneath to express interest one way or another, because the vote will be taken, all the money will be pulled together. But yes, it's a fantastic conversation to be having with customers as an industry, and getting that that activism and all of the work that Share Action do in this space, you know, of going to AGMs and asking the difficult questions and getting people engaged that way is a fantastic tool for engagement, and we want to see more of it for sure.
Yeah, I just want to give another hat tip to Share Action. Absolutely love what they do. They're just so brilliant, aren't they?
Yeah.
And all of those barriers that you were just describing, yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think it's something that the government is currently looking at. I think they've set up a working group to see how they can overcome some of those barriers when it comes to the pooled funds. So yeah, kind of a watch this space type thing, isn't it? Just a couple of last questions. So
Sure.
next one is on investor diversity. This is something that I really care about, seeing more women looking after their money, people of colour, people on lower incomes. What are you seeing in terms of your customer base and the diversity there, and how do you support that?
So it's really interesting. So obviously we are for everybody in the UK. Like, our pension product is for anybody 18 to 80 with a defined contribution pension. And as a result, you know, we want to make sure that our own company reflects wider society so that we can make products and create a service that, you know, meets the needs of the diverse range of people in society. I mean, so we think, you know, that begins at home, right? So we're very proud that we have complete gender parity across our whole business, across our senior management team, and across our board. And then across the business, we have 40% representation of ethnic minority groups, which is unheard of in, obviously, in financial services. We're an accredited living wage employer. We all own shares in the company. And so we kind of started to begin there and say, look, we want to open up the pensions industry and financial services to people who've been historically underrepresented. And that's kind of our first step, is making sure that we are being a model corporate citizen. And then what we do is we have sort of key themes around those areas that we will, when we approach our money managers and we say, look, we know you're going to be voting in thousands of AGMs this year using the votes of our customers' money. These are the really core key issues that we have, like, as a business, that we need you to go and you know, kind of make sure that you're really engaging with companies on. First of all, that's climate change. It's always going to be climate change. But then, yeah, that's gender diversity on boards. It's making sure that there's gender diversity on senior management teams, and it's making sure that the gender pay gap reporting is there to use. But that's also ethnic diversity on boards. It's pushing for data on ethnicity pay gaps. It's making sure that senior management teams are also ethnically diverse. And that's something that's very important to us as a business, because, you know, we believe that, you know, the financial services industry is obviously not reflective of wider society. And if we want to see huge systemic change in this country, then we need to make sure that at the highest levels of every company in this country, you know, is reflective of the diverse nature of the UK population. And then, of course, the living wage, because still only a minority of companies in the FTSE pay a living wage to their staff, and that's another kind of key theme that we push with our asset managers to get answers on, and we're part of the Good Work Coalition with Share Action as well, to sort of work collectively with other institutional investors to drive action in that space.
Gosh, you're so active. I mean, I had no idea. That's so great. And yeah, just mentioning there the race pay gap. I mean, that feels to me like such an easy win, because we already do that with the gender pay gap. We already, you know, companies are already meant to report on that. Let's do it on the race pay gap too.
Yeah.
Hopefully we see that happen quite soon. So just one, oh, sorry, were you going to say?
No, go ahead.
Just one last question then. When should people invest in speaking to a financial advisor? When should they go and spend the money to do that?
So it's quite interesting with financial advisors. So, I mean, in the pension space, the reason you would have to speak to an advisor in the pension space is if you have something called safeguarded benefits. So that means if you have a defined benefit pension, so those are the pensions where you have an income guaranteed for the rest of your life. So if you have one of those that's worth over £30,000 as its transfer value, then you'd have to speak to an advisor. Same for other kind of guaranteed features in the pension space. There's no other regulatory basis for speaking to an advisor outside of that. And very often, due to affordability reasons on the advisor side and to do with insurance, they generally don't want to talk to you unless you have around £100,000 or £150,000 in assets. So what that means is, you know, for most people in the UK, they're going to be unable to access paid advice or unable to afford paid advice, because it can also be very expensive. And so we have these advice gaps, and Citizens Advice, who I actually used to work for before I joined Pensionbee, have, you know, sort of coined the term about the advice gaps and about the fact that, you know, there are millions and millions and millions of people in the UK who want advice and who would benefit from advice but are unable to pay for it or access it. And so the government obviously is very aware of this issue, and I think Citizens Advice published that work back in 2015, and the government has you know, really taken on board, and they've developed lots of free guidance services for people who want to access advice. So if you're over 50, there's PensionWise, which is a free, used to be face-to-face, but now it's sort of, I imagine, only telephone service for anyone talking about their options at retirement. If you're under 50, there's the Pensions Advisory Service. You can call them up, live chat, anything to do with pensions. Then there's the Money and Pension Service, so looking more broadly at your kind of financial resilience or your financial health outside of pensions as well. There's going to be free services from MAPS. I think for anyone who wants to think about investing more responsibly, then of course Share Action is a fantastic place to start in terms of resources, trying to understand more about what are the options available to you. Good with Money, I think, published some free online tools. But there is a lot of free stuff out there for people. I mean, if they're making you know, if they are, you know, coming up against very complex financial decisions, then obviously, yes, paid advice might be the option for them. It's just there are some things to consider around the kind of the cost of accessing that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll leave all the links to all of those free resources in the description, as well as a link to Pensionbee, so everyone can go along and check you out. But Claire, I've just so enjoyed speaking to you. Thank you so much. I had no idea that you were so active and doing all of these things, and so it's so great to hear. And
it's just the beginning, Charlene. So yeah, watch this space. Yeah.
But also fossil-free option. I think that's just, you know, just so helpful. It's really something that consumers are demanding and just aren't seeing a lot of people offer it to them. So thanks so much.
Yes.
Well.
And that was in direct response from our customers. And, you know, if our customers again ask for something else, then we will respond to that in the future. So we're 100% driven by, you know, what our customers are asking for.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you.
Cool. All right. Well, nice to speak to you.